When my daughter was moved to the ICU, I posted she was in critical condition. My sister's public response made me cut off half my family. I typed that post with shaking hands. My daughter had been in the hospital for 6 hours already, and the doctors had just moved her from pediatric observation to the ICU because her oxygen levels wouldn't stabilize. She was 7 years old. She weighed 44 pounds. She had tubes in both arms and a monitor clipped to her finger that beeped every time she shifted in the bed. And I couldn't stop watching that number, like if I looked away it would drop. My wife was in the chair next to the bed holding our daughter's hand, crying without making any sound, and I stepped into the hallway because I needed to breathe and I needed to let people know. Family. People who loved her. That's all I was doing. I posted 3 sentences. She's been moved to the ICU. Critical condition. Please pray for her. That was it. No drama. No details. Just the truth in the only 3 sentences I had the capacity to form. My sister responded within 4 minutes. I'm Marcus, 38, male. I want to be fair about who my sister was before that night, because this story doesn't make sense if I paint her as a cartoon villain. She was the kind of person who remembered every birthday, who sent long text messages when you were going through something hard, who had been the maid of honor at my wedding and cried during her own speech. She was 2 years older than me, and for most of our lives she had been the person I called when I didn't know what else to do. We had grown up tight. Not in the way people say that to seem relatable, genuinely tight, in the way that only happens when 2 kids survive the same difficult household and decide to protect each other through it. Our parents divorced when I was 9 and she was 11. We moved 4 times before high school. We shared context that nobody else had. That kind of closeness doesn't develop on accident. You earn it. So when I saw the notification pop up on my phone and saw her name, I assumed it was going to be something like, I'm on my way, or calling you right now, or even just a heart. Any of those things would have been exactly right. What she wrote was, this is what happens when parents don't listen. I told you months ago she needed a second opinion and you both ignored me. Praying for her, but this is a wake-up call. I read it 3 times standing in the hallway of the ICU with the fluorescent lights buzzing over my head. Then I read it a 4th time. It was public. My post had been public because I wanted family and friends to see it quickly without having to make 40 phone calls. She had commented publicly on a post about my daughter being in critical condition, that my wife and I were responsible for this, in front of everyone we knew, while my daughter was in a room 15 feet away with oxygen tubes in her nose. I didn't respond. I put my phone in my pocket and went back into the room and held my daughter's other hand and didn't say anything to my wife because she didn't need that information right now. She needed to be present. I needed to be present. Whatever was happening on my phone could wait. But I didn't delete the comment. I don't know why. Maybe I already understood somewhere deep in the back of my mind that it was going to matter later. My daughter's name is her name and I'm not putting it here. What I will tell you is that she had been diagnosed 8 months earlier with a rare autoimmune condition that affects children, and managing it had been the most terrifying and consuming thing my wife and I had ever done. We had seen 3 different specialists. We had read everything. We had changed her diet, her environment, her school schedule. We had spent more hours on the phone with insurance companies than I care to count. We were not negligent parents. We were exhausted, scared, and doing everything within our power to keep our child healthy. My sister had, in fact, suggested we get a second opinion. Once, at a family dinner 4 months earlier. It was not a sustained campaign of concern. It was one comment over pasta, and when we explained that we had already seen multiple specialists and that her care team was coordinating, she nodded and said okay, and that was the end of it. I remember this clearly. My wife remembers it clearly. We did not ignore her. We heard her, we responded, and she accepted our answer in the moment. But that's not how she described it on Facebook. The night stretched out the way ICU nights do, in increments of vital signs and nurse check-ins and the terrible silence between beeps. My daughter's oxygen stabilized around 2 in the morning. By 4, one of her doctors came in and said she was responding to the new treatment and that they were cautiously optimistic. I cried in the hallway again, this time in a completely different way. My wife and I held each other for a long time. I checked my phone sometime around 5:30. There were 47 comments on my post. My sister's comment had been liked by 11 people. 3 of them were family members. 2 were aunts on my mother's side. 1 was my mother. My mother had not called me. My mother had not texted me. My mother had liked a comment insinuating that I had brought this on my daughter through negligence, while her granddaughter was in the ICU. I sat down on a bench in the hallway and stared at that screen for a long time. There were also comments from friends offering prayers and support, messages from my daughter's teachers, notes from people I hadn't spoken to in years, warmth from unexpected places. And then, nested in the middle of all of it, a thread where my sister had continued. Someone, a mutual family friend, had gently pushed back, saying something like, "I'm sure Marcus and his wife are doing everything they can." My sister had responded, "I love my brother, but there were signs that were ignored. I've been saying this for months. I hope this is the turning point." Months. She was still saying months. There is a specific kind of anger that doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like clarity. Everything sharpens. The fluorescent light overhead suddenly seems very precise. The sound of the monitor in the next room is distinct and clear. You notice things. The time on the clock. The scuff on your left shoe. The exact wording of what someone wrote and the exact gap between what they wrote and what was true. I was not going to respond from a hospital hallway. I was not going to get into a Facebook argument while my daughter was in the ICU. That was a line I was not willing to cross, not because I was afraid of the confrontation, but because my daughter deserved better than having her crisis become her father's family drama. But I took screenshots of everything. All of it. Every comment, every like, every timestamp. I don't know what made me think to do that either. Looking back, I think some part of me understood that the next few days were going to require documentation. My daughter was moved out of the ICU after 41 hours. I cried again in that hallway. The doctors said she needed close monitoring at home, specific medications, follow-up appointments. We were sent home with instructions that took up 3 printed pages and a very clear set of restrictions on her activity. She was pale and tired and small in my arms when I carried her to the car, but she was awake. She looked at me and said, "Daddy, the beeping stopped." And I said, "Yes, sweetheart, the beeping stopped." We had been home for approximately 6 hours when my mother called. Not to ask how my daughter was. Not to say she was relieved, or that she had been worried, or that she was sorry she hadn't reached out sooner. She called to talk about my sister. "Your sister is very hurt that you haven't responded to her." I held the phone and said nothing for a moment. "Mom, my daughter just got out of the ICU." "I know, and thank God she's okay. But your sister is family and she's upset." She posted publicly that I caused this. There was a pause. She didn't say that. She said she had concerns and she hoped it was a wake-up call. On a post about my daughter being in critical condition, while she was in the ICU. She was worried too, Marcus. She expresses things differently. I want you to understand what it felt like to have that conversation. My daughter was in the next room sleeping. She had tubes in her arm 12 hours ago, and I was being asked to manage my sister's feelings. "I'm not calling her right now," I said. "She's going to be very hurt by that." "I'm sure she will be." My mother made a sound that I had heard my whole life, a specific exhale that meant I was being difficult, that I was making things harder than they needed to be, that the emotionally mature thing to do would be to smooth this over for everyone's sake. I had folded to that sound many times. I had apologized for things that weren't my fault many times because of that sound. "I'll talk to her when I'm ready," I said. "Right now I'm focused on my daughter." I hung up. My wife came into the kitchen where I was standing and looked at my face and said, "Your mom?" "Yeah." She put her hand on my arm. What did she want? To tell me my sister is hurt that I haven't called her. My wife was quiet for a second. Then she said, very calmly, "Okay, we're not dealing with this today." She was right. We didn't deal with it that day. But it didn't go away. Over the next 4 days, I received messages from 3 different family members, 2 aunts and a cousin, all variations of the same script. My sister was hurt. My sister had only been trying to help. My sister loved my daughter and had been so worried. Why was I being cold? Why hadn't I reached out? Didn't I know that family was supposed to come together in a crisis? None of these people had called or texted when my daughter was in the ICU. Not one of them. But now, for days later, they were all very concerned about my sister's emotional state. I responded to none of them. I read every message carefully, saved every one, and responded to none of them. My wife and I had a long conversation on the 4th night after we got home. My daughter was asleep. We were at the kitchen table with tea we weren't drinking, and she said, "Tell me honestly what you want to do." I had been thinking about it for 4 days. I had the screenshots. I had the timeline. I knew what my sister had written and when she had written it and who had liked it. I knew that my mother had never called while our daughter was in critical condition. I knew that 3 family members had mobilized on my sister's behalf, but not one of them had checked on my child. I want to respond, I said. Publicly. I want to set the record straight. My wife thought about it. That's going to start a war. I know. With your mother too, probably. I know. So you've made your peace with that. I looked at her. Have you? She picked up her tea, looked at it, put it back down. Honestly. Yeah, I have. I've been making peace with it for 4 days. That surprised me. My wife had always been the one who counseled patience with my family. She had navigated my mother's opinions and my sister's occasional commentary with a grace I consistently failed to match. She was the buffer. She was the diplomat. If she was done, then something had shifted that I hadn't fully accounted for. What changed? I asked. She looked at me steadily. Your sister liked her own comment. Did you notice that? I pulled up the screenshots on my phone. I looked. I hadn't noticed that. But she was right. Among the 12 likes on my sister's original comment, one of them was her own. My wife said, she didn't post that out of grief or panic or confusion. She knew exactly what she was writing. She liked her own words while your daughter was in the ICU. I sat with that for a long time. The following morning, I wrote a post. I took my time with it. I wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it 4 times. I was not going to be emotional. I was not going to call names. I was going to be precise. I said, thank you to everyone who reached out during the hardest 2 days of my life. My daughter is home and recovering. I want to address something directly. A family member chose to respond to my post about her critical condition by publicly suggesting that my wife and I were responsible through negligence. This is false. My daughter has been under the care of 3 specialists for 8 months. We have followed every recommendation. The suggestion that we ignored medical advice is not only inaccurate, it was stated publicly at the worst possible moment. I do not intend to discuss this further with anyone who participated in that narrative. Those who know us know the truth. Those who don't, the door is open if you want to actually learn it. I tagged nobody. I named nobody. But everyone who had been on that thread knew exactly what I was talking about. I posted it and put my phone face down on the counter and went to check on my daughter. My sister called within 20 minutes. I didn't answer. She called again. I didn't answer. She texted. Are you serious right now? You're really doing this. Then, I was scared for her too. I was just expressing myself. Then, 15 minutes later, you're being incredibly unfair and I think you know that. Then, an hour after that, in a longer message, I have been by your side your entire life. I was there for you when your marriage was struggling. I was there for you when you lost your job in 2019. I have never once asked you for anything and this is how you treat me? Because I made one comment when I was scared? I am your sister. You don't get to cut me off for being human. I read that one very carefully. 2 things stood out. First, when your marriage was struggling, my wife and I had gone through a rough period about 4 years ago. We had done couples counseling. It was private. We had gotten through it. The only person in my family I had confided in about that was my sister. She had just referenced that in a text to me that she had to know I might screenshot. Or maybe she didn't care. Maybe she was angry enough to swing whatever she could reach. Second, I have never once asked you for anything. That was interesting. Because 3 months ago, my sister had asked me for something. She had asked me to co-sign a personal loan. $15,000. She said she was getting out of debt and starting fresh and she just needed someone to vouch for her credit. I had said no because my wife and I had a strict policy about co-signing loans that we'd established years ago, and also because my sister had a complicated financial history that I won't detail here except to say it was not her first debt consolidation attempt. I had said no as gently as I could, and she had said she understood and we had moved on. Or so I thought. I have never once asked you for anything. I showed my wife that text. She read it and said, "She's rewriting history in real time." I know. She's also trying to use the marriage thing as leverage. I know that too. My wife's expression was calm in a way that I found slightly more unsettling than anger would have been. What are you going to do? Nothing today, I said. She's already escalating. I want to see where she goes on her own. This was, in retrospect, the right instinct. Because she wasn't done. By that evening, my mother had posted on her own Facebook page. Not tagging me, not mentioning me by name, but clearly, unmistakably referencing the situation. She posted a quote about family forgiveness. Then, in the comments, when someone asked if everything was okay, she said, "Just praying for peace in my family. Both of my children are hurting and I hate seeing them at odds. Sometimes fear makes us say things we regret. Both of my children are hurting." My daughter had been in the ICU 6 days ago. My mother had not called when it happened. But she had liked my sister's comment, and now she was on Facebook presenting this as a symmetric conflict where both sides had made mistakes. I took a screenshot of that too. One of my aunts, my mother's older sister, sent me a voice message. I transcribed it because I wanted the exact words. She said, "Marcus, honey, I've known you since you were born and I love you, but your sister is a mess right now. She's been crying for days. She just loves that little girl so much. I think you need to find it in your heart to call her and let her explain herself. Families don't always get it right, but they're still family." She had liked the original comment. I want to pause here and tell you something about what this felt like from the inside because I think it's important and I don't want to skip over it to get to the part where I do something about it. What this felt like was being asked to tend to someone else's wound while mine was still open. Being asked to perform reconciliation before any reckoning had occurred. Being asked to absorb something and call it love because the person who hurt me also loved me in other contexts. That's a dynamic I had been living inside my whole life without having a clear word for it. The assumption that because someone loves you, you owe them the management of the damage they cause. That because your sister was scared, the public accusation was forgivable. That because your mother loves her grandchild, her silence during the crisis and her participation in the narrative afterward should be excused. I had been taught to prioritize family harmony above my own accurate perception of events. For 38 years. That was the water I had been swimming in. My daughter almost died. And I was being asked to manage my sister's feelings about it. No, not this time. I started making a list. Not in a dramatic way. Just notes to myself, organized by person, about what had happened and when. My wife helped. We weren't angry at this point. We were methodical. What did we know? What could be documented? What needed to be addressed and in what order? The first item was the comment itself. Documented. The second was the pattern. My sister's claim that she had been saying this for months about needing a second opinion. I went back through our text history. I found one single text, from 4 months earlier that said, "Have you thought about getting a second opinion on her condition?" Just a thought. That was the entirety of her months-long campaign. One text. I screenshotted it. The third was the loan request she claimed had never happened. I found those texts too. The request, my gentle decline, her response of "totally understand," No worries. All of it time-stamped. The fourth was harder to document but important. Every family member who had reached out on my sister's behalf without first reaching out to check on my daughter. I had those records too. Phone logs. Message timestamps. I wasn't planning a lawsuit. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. But I was done operating without documentation. I was done being the one who kept no receipts because I assumed good faith. 2 weeks after my daughter came home from the hospital, my sister showed up at my house. I need to be clear about something. She did not call first. She did not text. She drove 40 minutes and knocked on my door on a Saturday morning while my daughter was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast. I answered the door. She was standing on my porch in a jacket, her eyes already red, holding a small gift bag. For my daughter, presumably. I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me. She said, "I needed to see you." I said, "You should have called. You wouldn't have answered." "Probably not." She exhaled. "Marcus, come on. This is me. You can't just." "You posted that my wife and I caused our daughter's medical crisis. Publicly. While she was in the ICU. I was scared and I panicked and it came out wrong. You liked your own comment." She opened her mouth and closed it. "An hour after you posted it," I said. "Not in the first wave of reactions. An hour later. You went back and liked your own words." Her face did something complicated. I don't even know why I do that. I do it automatically, I don't even think about it. "Okay. Marcus." "Okay," I said again. "I heard what you said. I want you to hear what I'm saying. What you wrote was not worry. It was accusation. And you amplified it after the fact. And then when I didn't immediately call you to smooth it over, you told our mother I owed you an apology, and she got 3 other people involved, and none of you asked how my daughter was. Not one of you." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's not fair. I've asked about her." "You asked about her in the context of asking why I wasn't talking to you. That's different." The silence stretched. A car went by on the street. She shifted the gift bag from one hand to the other. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I am genuinely, truly sorry. What I wrote was wrong and the timing was awful and I'm sorry." And here is where it gets complicated. Because she sounded sincere. Her eyes were wet and her voice was doing the thing it does when she isn't performing, when she's actually reached something real inside herself. This was my sister. The person who remembered every birthday. The person I had called at 2 in the morning when my wife and I went through our hard year. The person who had driven me to urgent care once when I was 26 and didn't have a car and couldn't stop vomiting. That person was standing on my porch with a gift bag and red eyes saying she was sorry. I believed she was sorry. I also believed she had done it. Both things were true. Both things were going to stay true. "I hear that," I said. "I appreciate that you came. I need you to understand that I'm not ready to move past this, and I'm not going to be ready on your timeline." "What does that mean?" "It means I need space and I'm going to take it, and I would have appreciated it if you'd called first so my daughter didn't have to see this from the kitchen window." She looked at the door. Looked back at me. "Is she okay?" "She's doing better. She's eating. She has a follow-up on Thursday." "Can I see her?" This was the moment I had been dreading. Because my daughter loves her aunt. Had loved her aunt. They had a real relationship that was separate from my relationship with my sister, and I hadn't decided yet how much of my conflict to let bleed into that. "Not today," I said. "I'll let you know." She nodded. Her jaw was tight. She handed me the gift bag and said, "Will you give this to her?" "Yes." She walked back to her car. I watched her go. She sat in the car for a while before she drove away. I went back inside. My daughter looked up from her cereal. "Was that Auntie?" "Yeah." "Why didn't she come in? We just needed to talk about some grown-up stuff. She says she loves you." She went back to her cereal. I put the gift bag on the counter and stood there for a minute. My wife was in the doorway of the kitchen looking at me. I shook my head slightly. She nodded. What I didn't tell my wife right away, because I needed to think about it first, was that while my sister was on my porch I had noticed something. She'd mentioned 3 times during our conversation that she was going through a lot right now. She'd said it in the way people say something they hope you'll ask about. I hadn't asked. But she had said it. And I remembered the loan. The loan I had declined 3 months ago. I'm not a suspicious person by nature. Or I wasn't. But something about the timing, the intensity of her reaction to my not engaging, the way she'd mobilized family so quickly, the comment about never asking me for anything, was starting to form a shape. I called my cousin that night. Not one of the ones who had messaged me on my sister's behalf. A different cousin, someone who was adjacent to the family drama without being inside it. Someone who knew my sister well enough to have real information. We talked for 40 minutes. I listened more than I talked. And at the end of the conversation I thanked him and hung up and sat with what he'd told me. My sister's financial situation was worse than I had known. Significantly worse. She had borrowed money from my mother. More than once. My mother hadn't told me. My aunt, the one who'd sent me the voice message about calling my sister, had also lent her money. My aunt hadn't told me that either when she was urging me toward reconciliation. The people calling for family harmony were also the people who had a financial stake in my relationship with my sister remaining functional. I need to be very precise about what I mean here, because I'm not accusing anyone of a conspiracy. I don't think anyone sat around a table and planned this. But I do think that when you owe people money, you need them to still think well of you. And I think that when people have lent money they want back, they have an incentive to keep that person connected to other family members who might also help. And I think that my mother and my aunt were invested in my sister's reputation in a way that had nothing to do with my daughter's health and everything to do with their own exposure. That was the thing that had been nagging at me. Why were people who had said nothing to me while my daughter was in the ICU so urgently concerned with my relationship with my sister 4 days later? Why the pressure? Why the coordinated outreach? There are 2 explanations. One is that they genuinely love my sister and wanted the family to heal. 2 is that my sister had been working the phone and they had a reason to listen. Probably it was some of both. I told my wife everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of her skills. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do with this?" "I don't know yet. Do you think she was going to ask you for money again?" I thought about the conversation on the porch. The going through a lot right now. The 3 mentions. The way she'd held the door open for me to ask. "I think that's possible," I said. So the public comment. I don't know. I genuinely don't know if she did it on purpose or if it was an impulsive moment that she's now trying to turn into leverage. Both are bad. They're bad in different ways. My wife was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that I've thought about many times since. She said, "You know what the saddest part is? If she had just called us while your daughter was in the ICU, genuinely called to ask how she was, I think you would have lent her whatever she needed." I thought about that. She was right. I would have. The following week I received a long email from my mother. She'd moved from Facebook posts to email, which felt like an escalation in its own way, like she had more to say than a comment thread could hold. The email was detailed and it was, I want to be fair, clearly written by someone who was genuinely in pain. My mother has never been good at being wrong. She was raised by a woman who was never wrong either. It's a generational thing that I have compassion for even as I recognize it as a pattern. She cannot admit error directly, but she can write in circles around it. The email said many things, but the central argument was this, that families go through hard times, that people say things under stress that they don't mean, that holding grudges is a kind of poison, and that my daughter needed a full and healthy family around her as she recovered. It was clever. She made it about my daughter. She framed my position as something that would harm my child. I reread it twice. Then I wrote a response. This one I also took my time on. I said, "Mom, I love you. I need you to understand some things clearly. When your granddaughter was in the ICU, I posted that she was in critical condition. You liked a comment suggesting that my wife and I caused this through negligence, and you did not call or text me for 2 days. I am not going to process that through the lens of whether I'm holding a grudge. I am going to process it through the lens of what happened. I don't need you to take a side in an argument with my sister. I do need you to be honest with yourself about what you chose to do that night and what it meant. When you're able to have that conversation, I'm available for it. Until then, please give me space to focus on my daughter's recovery. She did not respond for 11 days. When she did, it was not to engage with what I'd written. It was a short message saying she was praying for us and that she hoped I would think about what family means. That was her move. The prayer as a closing argument. The implicit suggestion that I was the one who had departed from the values of family. I forwarded it to my wife without comment. She sent back a single punctuation mark. A period. That was the correct response. My daughter's follow-up appointment went well. Her levels were improving. The specialist was cautiously optimistic about her trajectory but said she'd need to be monitored closely for the next 6 months. We came home from that appointment and she asked if she could watch a movie and I said yes, and she curled up on the couch with a blanket and I sat next to her and watched a movie about a cartoon fish and thought about what the next 6 months were going to look like. I had made some decisions. I want to walk you through them because I think the reasoning matters as much as the outcome. Decision 1. I was going to maintain the post I had written. Not delete it, not edit it, not clarify it or soften it. It was accurate. I was going to let it stand. Decision 2. I was going to stop responding to intermediaries. Every family member who contacted me on my sister's behalf was going to receive a version of the same message. I appreciate your concern. Please reach out to my daughter directly if you want to stay connected with her. My relationship with my sister is something I need to handle directly with her. Decision 3. I was going to contact my sister one more time. Not to reconcile. Not to give her another chance to apologize. I was going to have a specific, bounded conversation about something I needed her to understand, and then I was going to let the distance be the distance. Decision 4 was harder. I had not told anyone outside my wife about the financial information my cousin had shared. I was still deciding what to do with it. The intermediary messages mostly stopped after I started sending consistent responses. People don't usually push when you give them a clear, calm, non-emotional reply. The ones who kept pushing after that were, I think, genuinely worried rather than strategically motivated. I tried to give them grace for that, even when it was exhausting. My sister texted 3 weeks after the porch visit. Are you ever going to talk to me again? I texted back, yes. Can you call me Tuesday evening? She called Tuesday. On time. We talked for a long time. I won't transcribe the whole conversation because parts of it were private in a way that I want to respect, even now. But I want to tell you the parts that matter. I told her directly that I didn't believe she had raised concerns about my daughter's care for months. I told her I had one text. I told her I had screenshotted it. I told her the claim that she had been saying something for months was not true. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I talked to Mom about it. And to Aunt Joan. I said it more than once, just not in a text to you. So you said it to other people but not to me. Yeah. So you raised a concern about my daughter's medical care with other family members and not with me. Another silence. That sounds bad when you say it like that. How else would I say it? She didn't have an answer. I told her I knew about the financial situation. I told her I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because I needed her to know that I understood the context, and that I wasn't going to pretend I didn't. I told her that it was relevant to me that people who were calling for family harmony had a financial stake in her relationships. She was angry for a moment. She said I was making assumptions. I said I was making observations. She said the two weren't always different. I said I was aware of that. Then I asked her directly, were you going to ask me for money? The silence this time was the longest. I needed help, she said finally. I was going to talk to you about it. And when I didn't call you after the hospital, that complicated things. Marcus. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking if that's true. It's complicated. Okay. We talked for a while longer. At the end of the call, she asked what happened now. I said I didn't know. I said I needed more time. I said my daughter was my priority and everything else was going to have to wait. She said, very quietly, I miss you. I believed that too. I miss you too, I said. Because I did. Missing her and being unable to trust her were not mutually exclusive. That's the hardest thing to hold, in my experience. When the person who hurt you is also someone you genuinely love and the love doesn't go away just because the trust does. I hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time. My wife asked how it went. I said, she was going to ask me for money. I know, my wife said. You knew. I suspected. You suspected too. Yeah. She made tea. We sat together. Outside the kitchen window it was getting dark and somewhere in the house our daughter was asleep, breathing steadily, with stable oxygen levels and a follow-up appointment in 6 weeks. So what now? My wife asked. I thought about it. What I came back to after all of it was something simpler than I expected. I didn't want to burn everything down. I didn't want a permanent fracture that my daughter would grow up inside. I also wasn't going to pretend nothing had happened, or let the people who had participated in that narrative face no consequences for it. What I wanted was something that I'm not sure has a clean name. Accountability without annihilation. Honesty without warfare. Distance that was chosen, not inflicted. I called my mother the next day. She answered on the second ring, which surprised me. I said, I want to talk. Not about your sister. About you and me. She said okay. I told her what I had told her in the email, but this time out loud, without the buffer of writing. I told her that the night my daughter was in the ICU was the night I had needed my mother, and she had not been there. I didn't say it accusingly. I said it as a fact, as the thing I most needed her to understand. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different. Not the voice from the email. Smaller. I saw the post, she said. And then I saw your sister's comment and I thought maybe she has a point. And then I felt ashamed of thinking that and I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. This was, in its way, the most honest thing she had said in this entire situation. It was not a complete accounting. It didn't explain liking the comment, or the passive-aggressive Facebook posts, or the email. But it was a crack in something that had been sealed up for a long time. I needed you to call me, I said. Not to weigh the merits of the comment. Just to call me. I know, she said. I know that. We didn't resolve everything on that call. We didn't resolve most things. But there was something different in the air at the end of it. An acknowledgement, maybe. A recognition that something had been broken and that the breaking was real and that the path forward required admitting that. With my aunt, the one who had sent the voice message, I handled it differently. I called her and I was kind. She was in her 70s. She had lent my sister money and she was worried about her and she had involved herself because she loved people and didn't understand boundaries and had been doing it her whole life. I told her I appreciated that she cared and that I hoped she and I could stay in touch and that the situation with my sister was something I needed to handle on my own timeline. She cried a little. She asked about my daughter. She told me 3 times that she had been lighting candles for her at church. I let her. The other family members who had messaged me got a similar version of decision too. Consistent. Calm. Non-escalating. A few responded with understanding. A couple went quiet. One sent a long defensive message that I didn't engage with. My sister and I did not immediately return to what we were. We talked maybe once every 2 weeks for the next couple of months. The conversations were careful in a way that they had never been before, which is a loss. The carelessness of an old relationship. Being able to say anything without calculating at first, that was gone, and I didn't know if it was coming back. But she was dealing with her financial situation. Slowly. On her own. She didn't ask me for money and I didn't offer it, and that felt like a boundary that was finally, after many years, sitting where it needed to sit. My daughter's 6-month follow-up showed significant improvement. Her specialist said she was responding better than expected. She had gained 3 pounds. She had gone back to school part-time. She was, by every measure that mattered, getting better. I posted about that too. Shorter than the original post. Just, 6-month update, she's doing really well. Thank you to everyone who prayed and sent love. It meant more than you know. My sister liked it. My mother commented, "So grateful. Love this girl more than anything." I let it stand. I didn't respond to my mother's comment and I didn't delete it. Both of those things felt right. Letting her have the moment. Not pretending it was uncomplicated. What I want to be clear about for anyone who's been in a version of this situation, I did not fully cut off half my family. That was where I was heading in those first raw weeks, and I think if I had acted on it I would have done something I couldn't undo. What I did instead was establish real, honest distance with the people who had chosen a side in that moment, and I took my time deciding who deserved what kind of access to me and my daughter. 2 people are genuinely no longer in my life. I won't say who, but they were people who, even when given space and time and the opportunity to show some accountability, continued to minimize what had happened and continued to prioritize my sister's comfort over the reality of what had occurred. When I reached out to them directly and laid it out plainly, they chose, essentially, to maintain their position. That's their right. But it's also my right to decide that's not something I want in my life or my daughter's life. The others, my mother, my sister, most of the family, are in a different category. Present but differently. With more honesty and less pretense. With boundaries that are actually visible now instead of implied and violated. I think the biggest change is in me. I spent 38 years learning how to absorb things from this family and call it love. I was very good at it. It cost me something I didn't have a name for until recently, which is a kind of self-respect that comes specifically from refusing to be rewritten. From saying, I know what happened. I have the receipts. And I am not going to participate in a version of events that requires me to forget. My daughter doesn't know any of this. She's 8 now. She knows she was sick and that she got better and that some things in our family got complicated for a while. She knows her parents love her and that her grandmother sends her drawings in the mail and that her aunt calls every 2 weeks to ask how school is going. She knows the basics of her world, which are mostly intact. That's the thing I keep coming back to. When I made my decisions, the post, the distance, the conversation with my mother, the phone call with my sister, I wasn't doing any of it for a dramatic outcome. I wasn't engineering justice. I was just refusing to move forward on a false foundation. Refusing to teach my daughter that love means absorbing things and never naming them. I told my wife that once in the kitchen about 6 months after everything. She looked at me and said, "That's the best version of what happened." I said, "Is there a worse one?" She thought about it. "The worst version is that you were right about everything and it still doesn't fully heal." I looked at her. "Is that worse or just true?" She smiled. "Probably both. Probably both. That's where I've landed. The things I did were right. I'd do them again. There are still fractures. There is still the loss of who my sister and I used to be to each other, which I grieve in a specific, quiet way that doesn't go away. There is still the fact that my mother chose, in the worst moment, to do nothing and then to cover it with noise. But my daughter is healthy. My wife and I are solid. The foundation we chose for ourselves is still standing. And I did not fold. I want to ask you something because I've been wrestling with it and I want to know where other people land. When my sister apologized on that Tuesday phone call, genuinely and visibly and in the way I recognized as real from 36 years of knowing her, do you think I should have moved toward her more quickly than I did? I stayed at that 2-week distance for nearly 5 months before things started to feel slightly more like before. Some people in my life thought I held the line too long. My wife thinks I got it right. I genuinely don't know. And the financial piece, knowing she was going to ask me for money, knowing that some of the family pressure was probably connected to her financial situation. Does that change what she did? Or does context stop mattering at some point, when someone does something public and that precise during your daughter's crisis? I don't have clean answers. I have the choices I made, and I have a daughter who's getting better, and I have a relationship with my sister that might not fully recover and might, slowly, become something real again. I can hold both possibilities. I've had to learn how. If any of this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever been in a family where love and accountability don't seem to be able to exist in the same room, I'd really want to know how you navigated it. Not because I need validation. Just because these are the kinds of decisions that people make in private and almost never talk about, and I think they deserve to be talked about. And if you've been reading this whole thing and you've never had to decide between protecting yourself and protecting the relationship, then you are either very lucky or your reckoning hasn't come yet. One last thing. My daughter asked me recently, out of nowhere, the way kids ask things, from the backseat of the car, not looking at me, in the middle of something else entirely. "Daddy, why did some of the family stuff get weird?" I kept my eyes on the road. "What do you mean?" "Like Auntie didn't come for a while. And you seemed sad." I thought about what to say. I landed on this. Sometimes when someone gets really sick, people get scared, and when people get scared they don't always do the right thing. And then the family has to figure out how to be okay again. She thought about it. "Did you figure it out?" "We're figuring it out." She nodded. "Okay." She went back to looking out the window. That was the right answer, I think. Not clean. Not resolved. But honest. I'm still figuring it out. I think that's the most truthful thing I can tell you. If you made it to the end of this, and honestly, if you did, you were probably thinking about your own family for most of it, consider subscribing. Not because I'll always have stories this long, but because if you're the kind of person who reads 40,000 words about a Facebook comment and recognizes your own mother in it, we're probably going to understand each other pretty well.